Значит, уважаемые коллеги, начинаем нашу.
Dear colleagues, we start our session. Development of labs as a condition to create the sustainable systems to respond and identify the outbreak of infections. That is an important topic, and today we understand perfectly that on the work of the labs, many things depend also on the response system. The results depend, the efficacy and the goals on epidemiological control depend. Today, of course, we are going to speak about COVID and other infections, and we understand that the system for lab provision is the foundation of the information, and so this is the basis to assess the situation. And over the last years, WHO and other global organizations, they pay special attention to quick response and to development of the chain of labs. I would like to present the first speaker, Joanna Zwetyenga, so the expert for WHO office, lab expert of WHO. She will speak about improvement of lab work to enhance the actions against COVID-19. So we have her connected online. And dear Joanna, thank you for taking the time. So we are listening to you.
To speak today. Can someone share the presentation on the Russian version for me? Thank you. So indeed, I wanted to talk about globally how all the previous work which was done and the strategies which were set up on the lab sector and support in WHO Europe, how it actually helped the countries in their response to COVID and in the situation. So if I can get the next slide, please. So indeed, we have a very well set strategy, which was set for Better Labs for Better Health initiative, which was with clear goals to improve globally the overall situation in laboratories and notably the quality through 4 areas that we were tackling on a regular basis, which was area 1, which was more national lab policies and strategic plans. Area 2 was more at national levels and providing national trainings and programs, notably a lot of trainings on quality management implementation and a mentoring program, which I will talk about. Area 3 was more on establishing networks for emergency preparedness and response. And area 4 was on the advocacy, partnership and leadership. And all these fed into the COVID response. Next slide, please. Just quickly to show where, and again, next is the map, where we've been working globally. It's essentially for Kyrgyzstan, Moldova, and Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, where we started in 2014. Then progressively went to Turkmenistan for 2016, then started in Ukraine in 2017, and for Armenia, end of 2018, and Kazakhstan and Belarus we started in 2019. Next slide, please. And therefore, we based the COVID response on the actual strategy which was set for Better Lives, Better Health. As I said, we had 4 areas. And for this, we did the parallel in the response to COVID-19 with actually setting up coordinated action plans at central level with partners for COVID response, also improving quality through training. And again, we used the mentoring approach and regular assessments and trainings at country level for the COVID response. We used also the networking, which was set before COVID times, there again to exchange protocols and exchange information on the lab needs for COVID. And we did a lot of advocacy and leadership. Next slide, please. So indeed, we, for the Area 1 globally, because we had set national laboratory working groups, which had been working on lab policies and strategy plans, these same national laboratory working groups were already in place and allowed quickly to have meetings to set the COVID action plan in country. And this was done for Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Moldova, where we were able to move these groups very quickly, mobilize them, and set the specific action plans for these countries. And these were again to ensure how the possibility to scale up and to respond and build up capacities in the laboratories to respond to the COVID. Next slide, please. In Area 2, this was more about training. Again, we were used to providing quite a lot of training, so we did similar training approaches where we indeed started training mentors, national mentors, to go out in the different labs which were dealing with COVID response in the countries and be able to train them on establishing competency assessments for all the technical side and ensure that lab staff were qualified in providing the PCR test. We also helped them in implementing verification SOPs for all the PCR tests which was being done and how to record verification each time you were changing the reagents and consumables. Also how to set and monitor quality indicators, also on setting up good laboratory practices in general and perform risk assessments on the biosafety side. So these mentors were trained for all this in Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, and Uzbekistan. We also provided some quality trainings for regional laboratories. And then when, next slide please, will show indeed the first results which were obtained by the mentors. I can have the next slide please. So, yeah, there's one missing. Never mind. So we had, yes. So we obtained good results in we could see a progress in the implementation of the quality management systems in the laboratories which were mentored, and indeed we've been trying to improve laboratories in also trying to get them accredited. So we have some laboratories which are now getting ready for accreditation. And we're keeping up, the support, and notably for some of these labs which are involved in the COVID response. Next slide, please. On the Area 3, this was more on establishing networks. So indeed, we had established the European Regional Laboratory Task Force for high-threat pathogens in February 2020. And this came just at the beginning of COVID response. So of course, it became part of the COVID-19 laboratory network. We've been exchanging protocols through this network, notably for the SNP PCRs and how to detect variants. We've been doing quite a lot of country assessment of diagnostic capacities to see where were the gaps and to try and fulfill the gaps. Indeed, we've also been presenting country strategies to respond to COVID and sharing with this network what could be done. Next slide, please. There's a lot of work also which was done on developing standard operating procedures with all the this network of laboratory experts. And here you have a series of SOPs which were developed, which are stated here, such as sample collection, sample transport, rejection criteria, contingency planning, and all these SOPs were indeed shared across the network of all these labs. involved in the COVID response. And also, it's been participating with the virology group of experts, which was created by ECDC. And we have also a platform of ESCOLAB, which is allowing us actually to share all these protocols. Next slide, please. So indeed, support has been provided to countries to detect the variants of concern. So there's been a joint document which has been published with the CDC summarizing alternative options to high throughput sequencing, because this is quite a big investment. There's been support in trying to supply regions, primers and probes, and notably positive controls for these PCRs, which are targeting specific mutations, and a lot of trainings which have taken place also on the SNP PCRs, helping global countries to pre-screen the variants of concern. Next slide, please. So indeed, also a lot of advocacy, partnership, and leadership. Indeed, we've been supporting many countries in trying to mobilize the resources for the response to COVID, and we've been able to mobilize quite a lot of USAID funds, but also some ACT-A funds for the antigen RDTs, and which has been a great support for different countries. And that's it globally. I'm happy to answer any questions, but globally we do see indeed that all the work which was done previously was very helpful in being able to act quickly and to respond quickly in countries, and notably to mobilize all the people who we are used to working with in order to give an adequate response to the COVID. So thank you from my side.
Спасибо большое, Джан.
Thank you very much, Joanna. So that was really a very detailed presentation, and that is important that WHO is paying on such a big share of attention to enhancement of the lab network. Tell me, please, what do you think at the current stage of fight against of COVID and the monitoring of the situation? What would you say is the most important measure and area of your work? Thank you.
Уважаемая Джана, тут видно со связью какие-то возникли.
Dear Joanna, maybe we have some issues with the connection. So what would you say is the main area today to fight against COVID? I mean in terms of labs. What is the key measure? What is the key area?
Вот, коллеги, мы тогда продолжим. Я думаю, что...
Dear colleagues, when we have connection, so Joanna will answer that question because that's important. We go through certain changes and we find out what's the pathogen, and we are studying it, and what was shown and demonstrated has just a general trend globally. And this is important to understand for us to just move forward together, because we have to be doing that together. Could you just introduce my presentation, dear colleagues? I would like to give floor to Yuliya Demina. She will speak about how to organize the work of the lab network in the Russian Federation under the response to COVID-19. So, Yuliya, have the floor.
Okay, can everybody hear me, dear colleagues? Well, certainly We started our work together with WHO, and Joanna highlighted the directions of lab monitoring that have been done. Today I would like to tell you how we organized the response to COVID-19 pandemic, in particular how we structured the lab network in the Russian Federation. It is extremely important because it helps us to evaluate the situation and to develop the adequate response. If we have a look at the structure of Rospotrebnadzor, it's a surveillance body that allows to carry out a high-quality monitoring, a comprehensive monitoring, in order to evaluate the situation and organize the appropriate measures. Here you can see the structure of our service, and traditionally we work closely together with scientific organizations. So we have research institutions and we have labs that do it in practice. There are a number of institutions that allow to use the latest developments in order to prevent dangerous infections. Next slide, please. As for the lab monitoring, lab network covers the whole territory of the Russian Federation. There is a lab in each town, including the most remote areas in the north and east and south of Russia. Besides, for quite many years, we have been using a system, a stage system that works at local, regional, and federal level. At this slide, you can see a kind of pyramid. All information regarding pathogen circulation is collected locally. Then it's transferred to region facilities, and at the region level we have indication centers that help to detect pathogens, and they engage institutions that help to fight the virus. So all organizations have to cooperate with indication labs that allow to work with the most dangerous infections. Next level is central or national level. It includes a reference laboratory labs that operate using a scientific approach and specialize in monitoring some particular infections or a group of pathogens. On the slide on the right side, you see a map of Russia and abbreviations of infections we use and groups that are in charge of them. I'm showing you this scheme so that you understand how it has been integrated into the system of lab monitoring in order to provide adequate response, including a response to COVID pandemic. Certainly, the current existing system of the Russian service in 2022 will be celebrating 100 years anniversary. It is based on certain methodology. This system made it possible to adjust lab network to a new pandemic and organize monitoring regarding a new pathogen. I'm talking about the COVID-19. That monitoring has been integrated into the system without any harm to other operations. So working with COVID, we could assess assess situation for other pathogens as well. Here you can see the main stages that have been carried out while we were fighting the COVID-19. First, we developed test systems, then methodology that allowed to detect categories for testing, development, and introduction of the system. Stage by stage development of lab network. I will be talking in detail about each stage so that you understand how we adjust the function of our system. Then coordination of distributing test systems, scale up of production, higher volumes of lab testings, quality control of tests and organization of lab functions, optimization of a test system, monitoring of change in the pathogen, and developing sequencing system of pathogen. At this slide, you see the main stages that we carried out in order to properly respond to COVID-19. It covers the year of 2020, the most difficult period when we were trying to adjust to the new reality. As you see, that starting from 13 of December 2019 till creation of first PCR kits, there were only 2 weeks to pass. Then you see development of recommendations and mass production of testing kits, registration, and so on, plus creation of other test systems, not only for PCR, but other testing methods. Next slide, please. As for development of testing systems, as I said, we produced the first test systems just 2 weeks after the information about new virus had been announced, and we launched a mass production in order to use it throughout Russia. So as for methodology, it is a very important step, as everything that takes place should follow a certain structure. So at first stage, we issued methodology newsletters that regulated how to use testing systems, first testing systems in Russia. Then methodology recommendations or guidelines that were issued in February of 2020. Then there was a governmental decree in order to properly distribute testing systems. Then new epidemiological rules have been adopted, were adopted in May 2020, that regulated the rules and the requirements in the new situation, and another degree of by the government of Russia Federation in order to allocate funds for mass production of testing kits. On this slide, you see how methodological guidelines changed throughout the year. So first letters were issued at the end of January. So first testing systems kits were issued, and then it was accompanied with a certain guidance letter. And at first, we certainly covered patients with signs of coronavirus, especially those who had come from abroad. Then we used recommendations for lab operations, and afterwards we issued epidemic guidelines to regulate the measures. So this slide shows a step-by-step development of a lab network. As you see at the first stage, as we needed time in order to develop new systems. Second block included trainings for lab specialists who were allowed to work with new testing systems. So we did everything step by step, and such stage approach is very proved to be very good. It was a very good strategic decision in order to succeed. As you see at the first stage, there were involved 15 research institutions that work on the Rospotrebnadzor. On the second stage, we saw practical labs. You see 85 of them joined the system. At the third stage, medical organizations, facilities joined this pyramid when we understood what requirements had to be followed in order to work with the pathogen. We trained the specialists and so on in order to join all the labs. And at the last stage, all labs that had all conditions to work with microorganisms joined the network. We certainly used the individual approach based on what conclusions we did regarding a certain lab. So if a lab was going to work with the pathogen, it means that the protection level had to be equal to the third level of safety. But our test systems allowed to work at the level of security equal to 2. In other words, we could include a large number of labs that could help us to scale up the volume of testing. As for the training of personnel, one of the most important blocks, because the colleagues who cannot work with testing systems, do not know the specifics of the virus, could have made some mistakes that could lead to contamination inside the lab and could lead to false results as well. In other words, training of personnel was aimed to train the personnel how to work the requirements that are essential when you work with certain pathogens. As we know, the new pathogen is not well known. Another block of training included biological safety and ensuring requirements of lab organization. Second block was testing, making tests, automatization of certain stages. And as for the testing stage, we made it necessary to do valuable results, to ensure valuable results. It was very important to ensure that all labs that were engaged into the monitoring of COVID-19 did provided on-time information regarding the volume of lab tests they did, and in cases of positive results, they had to report on time. In other words, that had to be a coordinated, well-coordinated, centralized work. Next stage was coordination of distribution of test systems. Here you can see a reference of the governmental degree that says that our service is in charge of distribution the testing systems, testing kits, and coordination of carried tests. And this order was launched in April, and it still has been working in the same mode and going to be used for the next upcoming months. In other words, all labs, including medical labs or commercial labs, they have to follow the said requirements. And labs that work in these conditions, they get testing systems for free in order to prevent the spread of the virus. Next slide, please. As for the next stage is scale up of production. Certainly, when we talk about adequate testing of the population, we understand that we need to analyze all forms of the disease, including asymptomatic ones. Therefore, it was essential to scale up the production of testing kits, and the government of the Russian Federation issued a decree that made it possible to allocate funds in order to scale up the production. We are not talking about PCR testing, but AFA testing as well. So any lab, regardless what chain it belongs to, has to have a certain permit in order to use to make the testing. As you see, more than 128 million tests have been carried out. Next slide, please. As for scaling up lab testing, we believe that it's one of the most important tasks because only high quality and adequate testing can give us objective information regarding pandemic situation in Russia. As you see, of today, tests for COVID-19 are carried out in more than 1,000 institutions of Russia. Most of them are medical facilities, medical institutions. So you have seen that first only Rospotrebnadzor and its organization were in charge of it, but then providing the necessary training, we could extend the number of labs, and including commercial ones. And you see that 348 testing systems have been registered in Russia. As for today, 105 of them are locally produced. And there have been conducted more than 126 million tests. We are fourth in the world in order to cover testing of population. And overall, it's a very good indicator. So we carry more than 200 tests for 100,000 people per day. We make our best to stay at this level in order to be sure that we do everything we can in order to prevent the spread of the virus. As for quality control,
So this is very important, and we said that we have a system in place, what we have in that system, and then we also have the required volumes of the tests, and of course we should be confident that there is the quality required, that we can trust these tests, and we can use these results for control and monitoring. We have the monitoring of the tests, and we have the controls. The sanitary rules identify the criteria for control, and we have the supervisory, the practical part, and also the research organizations. And we have the legal tools which allow us to take measures, administrative measures, to eliminate those violations. So the next slide, the next stage is optimization of the test systems used. Today we say that we need express methods and quantitative methods. We need to decrease the time of test results, and we need to assess and understand the quality, assess the immunity of the person. And now we see the new test systems. This is LM system. These are antigen express systems, and IFA immunofluorescent analysis for the quantitative analysis of antibodies to N protein. And today it is regulated that in 48 hours the lab is obliged to give the result after they receive the samples from the patients. So the next block is at this stage is important for us, and there was a reason why I was asking Joanna what was the vision of WHO, at which stage we should focus today. And today we speak about the monitoring of the pathogen, which is sequencing, and we added the sequencing for the pathogen. And we see that the pathogens that are changing and there are mutations. And these mutations, they still will have to be assessed whether it has an impact, the virulence and its clinical forms, clinical manifestations. We need to monitor that and take the measures. So what are the causative microorganisms and pathogens? So, and we have this monitoring, and we have the order from our government, and this decree will help us to expand this monitoring for all of the labs in the country which do sequencing of pathogens, and this is how we'll get complete information online about the changes of pathogens. Of course, we will aim at decreasing the timeline of the samples delivery and the results to respond quicker. And the system which combines the monitoring and the practice of science, and it provides for practical measures to eliminate such focuses, to make isolation, so to take all of the measures required to decrease the risks of COVID distribution. And of course, we are saying that such levels of preparation helped us to share with our colleagues from abroad the practices, best practices and the systems, and also involve our colleagues to train trainee. And I should say that in December last year, over 1 million tests were supplied, and we plan to do more in line with our programs. And what I would like to say to finish my presentation, I could be talking for a long time, and to take your questions. And I would like to say that, of course, this is important for us to understand that COVID-19, the pandemics, they are relevant not to only one country. It's just happening with the whole globe. That is why we need to work together, especially those countries who are bordering on each other, who have one epidemiological space, and we are ready together with you to move forward and to protect our population from the spread of dangerous infections. Thank you very much. I'm happy to take your questions, if any. Thank you, Julia, for such a detailed and interesting presentation about the structure of lab work of Rospotrebnadzor and their response to COVID-19. The question is the following. Given that work which was done by Rospotrebnadzor over the past year and the beginning of this year, maybe you could just specify some of the main learnings over these 15 months and how these learnings could be changed. So what you would do differently for another pandemic of COVID. Thank you for this question. That's a very interesting question. And at this stage, we believe that we do everything correctly. We did the maximum out of what we had, and also how we managed to adapt. And what we would like to do, we'd like to do better. And now we understand that we need to develop more quick tests, the express tests, which on one hand should decrease timing, and then there should be quality. There are some test systems which are quick, but the efficacy and the results quality leave much to be desired. So we need to develop the platform, the basis to introduce the quick tests, to cut the timing for lab tests, and by cutting some such time, we are cutting the tests for our quick response, and also in many cases, if we have the lab proof, so just the treatment depends on that. And the second part here is deep study. I mean the sequencing that we are introducing more and more, and of course we will develop it further. And this large scale experience is the first time that we have it, and we will take into account different other measures that we are going to use in our practice, and it will require certain efforts, and this type of monitor is extremely important for us. And do you have more questions to Julia? Thank you very much for such an interesting presentation, and I would like to give floor to Stalbek Berdiyev, director of the Center, Republic Center for Quarantine and Dangerous Infections of Kyrgyzstan Republic. So Stalbek, so you have the floor. Good afternoon, dear colleagues, dear participants of the international conference, and I'm very, very happy that this international conference, despite the pandemic, is taking place in the usual format. And I would like to extend my special gratitude to the organizers of this conference, to our Russian colleagues. Based on the agreement between the Russian Research Institute of Infections and between our center, Republic Center for Quarantine and Dangerous Infections, we developed several labs for express diagnostics, and with the all of the required equipment, the expendables to do the PCR tests, and immune ferment analysis IFA. And so, starting from 2017, we closely cooperate with the Institute of Pathogens, and every year we are working at the plague outbreak centers, and we have it's in Chanshan and Talai, and Chanshan includes the pest spots, 3 pest spots, and the total area in Kyrgyzstan of the pest areas, and it's 38,000 square kilometers if you use GIS services to assess that. And we have over 500 pest locations, and in our republic we have 128 microbiological labs and 2 anti-plague, anti-pest labs, and we have 2 labs which are accredited in line with the ISO 17025, and 2 labs which are accredited in line with ISO 15189, and we received 4 mobile car labs. And every year starting from 2017, and every year we travel to the high mountain areas, and we do epidemiological tests. So the diagnostic tests are done with a PCR real time, and this is the use of mobile labs for DNA over pestis, which may be found in rodents, and it's also accelerated the results. When we use the classical methods of bacteriological test, it required more time, several days, and recently in our mobile labs we started with PCR, and we may also identify in which areas we have the pest, and also all of the field materials are tested for other infections such as we do the lab tests. We use IFA with the immunoglobulin A, and we had 238 positive 3 and the tick-borne encephalitis, and we did not find positive here, and also Congo fever and the Western Nile fever. We did this analysis. We can see in the slide in 2019, 578 positive 5, in 2020, 56 positive 1. And for the West Nile fever, IFA, we did 184, 3 positive in 2019, 186, and 9 positive. And we also do PCR tests for IFA and for brucellosis, and in our mobile lab we did brucellosis, and 285, 82 positive. And in 2019, 755, in 2020, 896, 105 positive. So PCR, so that was the immunoassay AIA, 128, 7 positive in 2019, and 2020, 49 positive. And also this mobile app, we used it for the global games of 2019, Nomad Games, and we did 142 tests with PCR tests, and there were 2 positive tests, one for DNA of COVID, and the other test we found DNA of adenovirus. And in 2020,
Лабораторию получили
we received the 4th car lab. And what is the so special about them? These used to be Gazelle cars, and this now these are the cars that they can travel anywhere. So this is the modern type of this car, which helps us to go through all of the mountains, and we can travel anywhere. And together with the Rospotrebnadzor, every day we are planning to travel to the hotspots, and this year we're also planning the tests, and we will use PCR for that. And in the north, every year we travel to Karakol region. And last year we found 4 cultures of the pest pathogen, and recently where we found these pathogens, so we do prevention and disinfection in those areas. We use the deep disinfection method, so which is giving us some efficacy in that spot. And during the pandemic of COVID-19, because of the unfavorable situation with the coronavirus in our republic, all of the 4 labs, mobile labs, they just were used in all of the regions of the republic, and until today we have a lot of work that we do for diagnostics of COVID-19. Our center until recently had over 52 tests, and in Batcaria, so it's 3,500, 1,417, and in Pachui region 1,300, in Talas region 29,266, and a total of 29,500 tests.
Well, we every time And it doesn't apply only to COVID-19 diagnostics. Our specialists, they prepare all medical staff in order to use personal protection equipment and to do proper PCR diagnostics. We have prepared and carried out a number of trainings in order to train specialists in various areas, and we have trained local virus specialists, lab specialists, in order to use PCR testing, in order to perform PCR testing. Well, that was my brief presentation of our operations in Kyrgyzstan. Thank you very much for your extremely informative presentation. Indeed, you did a great job. But if we talk about mobile labs in lab provision, how important it is? Well, mobile labs for express diagnostics are extremely important in our work. So first, mobile labs had some flaws in operations, but we provide constant feedback for equipment producers. They upgrade the equipment, and as for the latest mobile labs of the fourth generation, we can say that they're in line of all current requirements. As for high mountain regions, electric generators above 3,000 meters above the level, they didn't work properly as it was hard to burn gasoline. And so we didn't have enough of electric power in order to provide the testing. We took into account that we didn't have sufficient electric power. So now those generators are more powerful and they work much better. As for the trucks, sometimes they have difficulty to move across certain areas. Some of them, they could not reach some remote areas. But now we use other trucks that can reach any destinations that we want to visit. So we are going to cover the whole country with those labs. As for coronavirus infection, it's no secret that in Kyrgyzstan we have only one virus lab that works together with the surveillance agency. There is one more lab. So we had only 2 virus laboratories in the country. If we didn't have those mobile labs for express diagnostics, we would be in a very dire situation. So having support from Rospotrebnadzor, it was essential for us in order to organize a proper response to COVID pandemic. And we were able to perform on-time diagnostics. Then our local doctors, virusologists, undergone the testing trainings. In parallel, they were training local doctors. Therefore, we could significantly improve the situation in the country. So I believe that these mobile labs are extremely important. They're essential for our operations. And I would like to say thank you to the Russian colleagues who helped us to deal with the situation. Certainly, we are going to work closely with you in future. yes, both in practical and scientific fields. So thank you very much for your help and support. Well, thank you very much for your kind words and for your evaluation of our work. It is indeed important that to work closely. We do understand that sometimes equipment might not work in ideal model in in all the areas. So thank you very much for your feedback. Thank you very much for your proposals. It helps us to upgrade our mobile trucks so that they can operate anywhere. Thank you very much again for your very interesting reports. Well, there is one more question from Sergey Vladimirovich from Irkutsk Virus Institute. Well, I have a question. You've got quite many results, positive PCR testing results, including the use of mobile labs. So how many strains of plaque virus have you got in the set period? Well, it's a very relevant question. Thank you for that. Well, out of the carried out tests in the south of Russia, in 2019 we divided 18 positive PCR tests. Out of them we divided 2 cultures. And last year in the area of Isikul we found 4 cultures. And with the use of PCR test, we were able to divide about 8 positive results. We send those results parallelly to your institute in order to get objective picture. Well, thank you very much, dear colleagues. We do understand that mobile labs make it possible to provide appropriate monitoring. Certainly there is room for improvement, and the culture methods are going to be with us. It's a comprehensive approach that is going to be carried out in future. Thank you very much. I would like to give floor to Vasily Kuklev, who is the head of lab of epidemiologic analysis and focused of the Russian Research Institute. Vasily will be talking about special lab groups as a modern approach to deal with emergency situations. Well, thank you very much, Yuliya. Dear colleagues, I would like to tell you about our specialized lab groups and in particular how they help us to provide lab testing in emergency situations. Such anti-epidemic groups, teams, and the service in particular actually have a very rich experience. These teams first teams were established quite a long time ago, and certainly they went through certain development. First, they were focused on dealing with very specific aims, but today they introduce a very comprehensive approach to deal with infections. As for development of such team, it was caused by the challenges that the societies faced with new viruses. Overall, such teams took place in eliminated 123 epidemic breakouts starting from 1965. They have been used for providing epidemiological well-being in areas of emergencies. They provided epidemic well-being in humanitarian challenges zones and so on. As for upgrade of the function of these teams, it was inspired by the solution of St. Petersburg summit that took place in 2006 after the introduction of initiative of the Russian Federation to fight infectious disease. At the same time, new international sanitary rules were adopted on the international level, and therefore we started to establish a well-developed system in order to respond well for emergency situation. Next slide, please. As for current situation, the goals that are achieved by these teams is response to emergency situations in national health care. There could be various emergency situations like pandemics, epidemic caused by dangerous viruses, earthquakes, social conflicts, or bioterrorism. Our organization is able to eliminate breakouts. We can do lab diagnostics in order to perform sanitary biological control. And one more important function is to increase technical lab operation at a certain area. Next slide, please. As for today, our mobile teams have worked independently in various fields. As for the level of biosecurity 3, we work in line with the latest biosecurity requirements. We can complete our teams depending on a certain situation and goals we have to achieve. A strong point of our operations is comprehensive training of our specialists that are engaged in the work of our brigades. So they know how to deal with various situations, and they work with various pathogens, including the most dangerous. Overall, Rospotrebnadzor, the Russian surveillance agency, uses three formats of mobile labs. If we draw parallels with recently developed classification for mobile labs that was did together with Rospotrebnadzor and WHO division. So we use rather small mobile trucks, such as one you see on the slide in the left up corner, a larger lab with the use of the KAMAZ trucks, and a complete complex that includes a number of units. Certainly, they all have a patent of the Russian Federation. The most basic mobile lab is the lab of indication, designed to detect some small local outbreaks. It can be worked at biosafety level BSL2+. They can make PCR testing and so on. So it can work independently. Has a good power generator, ventilation, heating, and so on. Next slide, please. This type of lab has been upgraded. As you see, the first generation was used of such trucks was launched in 2006. We actually still use this lab. In 2015, it was upgraded in terms of engineering solutions, ergonomics, biosafety. There was upgraded the system of the trucks that allowed it to reach more difficult areas. And in 2019, the latest generation of lab of a mobile lab was introduced. A larger lab of indication and identification of pathogen is shown on this slide. It uses for express diagnostics and cultivating of the virus. The safety level is BCL3. It has a high autonomic power generation system, water supply, and so on. And as you see, the fifth type of the current classification is a mobile complex that includes 6 units with the biological safety 3+. It includes the latest developments in order to operate continuously, especially in extreme weather conditions, including very high and very low temperatures. We have used such labs in the area of the Russian Federation and overseas. For example, we used these labs in North Africa while eliminating Ebola virus, and these labs are still there in Africa and operate extremely well. As for mobile complex, it can be moved 2,000 kilometers away. If we need to transfer it further than 2,000 kilometers, we can use airplanes, air transportation. The size of these mobile units are so that they could be transferred in cargo air jets like Il-87, and this staff of such mobile complex includes 35 people, doctors, nurses, engineers, epidemic specialists, so all specialists that are needed in order to carry out the full spectrum of works. As for the scale of operations, it goes in line with the local regulations that and includes a number of actions in order to detect pathogens, perform toxic and infectious control. In terms of licensing, it is accredited by international standard ISO 75, and an important principle that is applied for each case of its work. It's a module approach. In other words, it includes 6 units that can be used or not used together, and on the other side, inside of each unit, one could modify its equipment, disposables, and stuff involved, so that a set goal is reached. As for tactics of using these mobile labs, it uses various technical resources, and the same applies to the completion of personnel. It could include a group of specialists or individuals. For some certain situations, we just used personnel in order to improve the performance of local labs and prevent possible outbreaks. Therefore, the rationale, our teams are involved in serious situations, as I said, including pandemics, force majeures, earthquakes, and so on, and separate units can be used in local situations in order to investigate the causes of local outbreaks, or some small-scale situations, so that a situation is solved. And when there is no need to use a full-size unit. Thank you very much for your time or for your attention. I would be happy to answer questions if any. Sorry, one more slide. In the last 6 years, we have performed a number of very important events. So we certainly do not use these units only locally on a national level. We also provide support for the neighboring countries and other countries as well. Starting from 2015, more than 30 mobile labs have been provided to a number of countries, and they showed a very high performance, especially with the start of the pandemic, because in many countries those labs were able to provide on-time testing, especially in large cities where lab service was not enough, and that really helped to fight the spread of COVID-19. Rospotrebnadzor carries out not only technical support, we also do training for local specialists, and as a result of such training, we do from time to time large-scale training events that bring together dozens of experts from various countries, and the latest one was a success. We have and the specialists showed a very high level of qualifications. Thank you very much for your attention. Well, thank you very much, Vasily. A very interesting report indeed. This direction of work, mobile labs, is bound to be developed. We do understand that it has a very high potential in order to respond fast for various situations. So I believe it's a very relevant topic. Again, thank you very much. If there are any questions to Vasily, you are very welcome to ask them. Okay. Well, thank you very much for such a detailed, informative report. I have a question. It's probably more a comment than a question. Well, there is an opinion that mobile lab are designed to provide support for a local lab in remote areas. At the same time, the experience of WHO and our colleagues from Rospotrebnadzor and from our colleagues of Western Europe show that during COVID-19 outbreak, mobile labs in various formats proved to be extremely efficient. They were used in various conditions. For example, we have experience of cooperating with our colleagues from Central Asia, Tajikistan, and so on, where mobile labs were used in remote areas. But at the same time, we have a very interesting experience of using such labs in Western Europe, where situation is much better, but the density of labs is quite good, but this proved to be very good in such environments as well. So my question is, can you say a few words about experience of using mobile labs in the territory of Russian Federation? And in your opinion, what is the potential of the future work of mobile labs in Russia? Thank you very much in advance. Well, thank you, Oleg.
I agree with your comment that different types of mobile labs can be used not only in some faraway regions without own labs, or these other regions hard to get, and we have the experience of using mobile labs, car labs in Russia. And so these labs are not only about our institute, so Mikrob Saratov, Stavropol in Rostov-on-Don, and in Irkutsk as well. And there are two specialized epidemiological teams, and material and technical, and materials and the HR resources. And we also involve the employees from the hygiene and epidemiology regional organizations of Rospotrebnadzor. And we also use the mobile labs in big cities such as Moscow. We use them when there was like the peak of COVID pandemic, when the station was the worst, and the module principle was used, and the flexibility of use, and having a stationary lab with its resources, and also in the backyard, so you could also install several modules. In the first place, we increased the number of tests, and secondly, we simplified the transportation of samples and tests and the materials, and by this we decreased the risk related to biological hazards and dangerous, because some of the stages of the tests which are done from time to time in one place and in other place with the disinfected material. As for the plans and prospects, So potentially there'll be some technological improvement for these cores. Before they are patented, and we have lots of plans actually, and we are going to develop them. Thank you very much. I would like to add Oleg was asking how we are using them in real life. So why do we use them? And we have 10 teams. Vasily mentioned. So this is the tool which is used by the head of sanitary authorities. So the chief sanitary doctor decides how to use them, and also some mass events, and we have lots of international events. These are some sports events, and some economic forums, and also different events. And the colleagues also mentioned the Nomad Games, and this is a very convenient. We can cover not only people with that task, but also the environment, the water, and the food when we have some big events, because we have higher workload, and we should have the minimal risks for some emergency situation, including also intestine infections, one block. The country is very big, and we have several natural disasters. For example, we have floodings now, and Sergei, the director of Irkutsk Institute, he knows about that, and he's in charge of Siberia and the forest, and they constantly travel to this flooding, identification of risks, monitoring with natural infections, reservoirs, rodents, and other pathogens and insects. So we have anti-pest brigades in the south, so this is everyday work. We also have the documents which identify the practical work and the anti-pest work. So these are the hotspots, and there we use for monitoring these institutions, and the practical institution. So Vasily was talking about a brigade, but this is like a Lego, so we may take this just 5 people depending on the goal, and in the anti-pest stations we can have the machines for the logical works, and we have the plant field works, and we have 11 natural spots for encephalitis and different infections. So this is everyday work, and the results of this work will be taken into account to assess the situation for decision making, and for changes in the prevention plans in the region. So this works not only centralized, but it is also put together under the regional level, and we are preparing for the World Cup also. With all, we had the basis. So in our centers of hygiene and epidemiology, we had the special rooms, the special blocks. We equipped them with medical blocks of with equipment, and we install the devices, and it helps in a short time to use these spots, and so that the specialist can work there, and we can make diagnostics of any situation in the region. It is also part of the one single lab network, which I showed. So please.
You can rephrase it afterwards. So my question is actually, after after testing, and you were speaking about the modular approach, now we see that we don't not only need testing for COVID in this case, but with the appearance of all these different virus variants, we need sequencing, and we see that the capacity is extremely limited in a lot of countries. So is it possible for the mobile unit, is there a sequence module to support countries? And this would be interesting. Thanks.
Спасибо за вопрос.
Thank you, Jan, for your question. Yes, really, we have the opportunity for doing sequencing in the modules and in several formats of mobile apps. And we also use our own devices, Russian devices, for sequencing. And maybe compared to PCR, we don't have that much experience, but we have this method, we use that. Thank you so much, we will develop that. So we don't have more questions. I would like to give floor to Mr. Rivajidin Zhuraev, head of reference lab of the Scientific and Research Institute of Virology of the Republican Specialized Scientific and Practical Medical Center for Epidemiology, Microbiology, Infectious and Parasite Diseases from Uzbekistan. So you have the floor, Rivajidin. And unfortunately, we cannot hear you. Now we can. Thank you for giving me the floor. I would like to speak about the quality system in Uzbekistan that we introduced to control the quality of the lab diagnostics. So the first was our reference lab, which was established in 1998 with the support of the government of Switzerland under the program of cooperation between the countries. And we started with the diagnostics with the viral hepatitis B. And then later on we started to be a separate division in the Ministry of Healthcare, and since 2012 we belong to the Scientific Institute of Virology, and in 2000 we had 13 people, and in 2020 we had 34 employees. And from 2000 year and on, the lab, the reference lab, is supporting itself financially, and the reference lab participated in the external quality control for HIV-1 for the reference lab every year performs the control of quality and quality control, and we have the national standards reference panels and intra lab reference samples. For each panel we have the license for mass production, and every 5 years there is re-registration going on. And the goal for external quality assessment is the efficacy of HIV diagnostic, hepatitis B and C, and in EIA and PCR labs, and it provides for identification of gaps in diagnostic labs, and it also helps to improve the quality of work. And in the intra-lab quality control was introduced. And so the quality control is in HIV/AIDS center, and in epidemiological services in the blood centers, Republican centers, and scientific institute. And in the Center for Control of Infectious in the US, for the first time, there was the quality assessment install problem introduced for the first time. Every year, the number of participants is growing. In 2018, it was 107 labs. And the external quality control is done by our reference lab using its own budget. In order to test the external quality assessment, we use the panel, standardized panel, which contains the samples with markers of HIV and AIDS and hepatitis in different concentrations. We assess the conditions, requirements for the lab, the work of equipment, material provisions, and the data for ecosystem, and the quality measures, and the data for safety of documents. In the next 3 slides, you may see the results of the external quality assessment. And for HIV, hepatitis B and C in different organizational structures, starting from 2015 till 2015. And we do not always get to 100% for all of the infections. One of the reasons may be absence of internal control, and we here see the use of internal controls in the lab of our republic. There is a growth number of the labs that use lab controls. And in 2018, the quality control, the temperature, so not all of the labs had the proper levels for these parameters. And provision of equipment and expendables is an average of 70% for the whole of Republic. And despite the increasing number of labs which are using internal control year on year, and we do not see the 100% values here. And there are labs which require repairs, and they have shortage of furniture and equipment. After processing all of the data from all of the labs, we identified the following reasons: in compliance with the temperature conditions for EIA and system storage, insufficient training, not use of internal control, shortage of electricity and water, no incoming control for test system, and shortage of equipment. And to improve the quality of lab diagnostic, we introduced the preventative corrective measures. So introduce the incoming control when you receive the new batch of test systems for sensitivity and specificity. Use internal control. Add train our employees to use internal control, how to do mapping of level check-ins, and how to do cleaning, and how to keep up with the cleanliness of the channels. And also we need to keep up with the temperature conditions in the thermostat equipment, in the fridges, include into the budget the quality control.
Практически значимость, значит, первые
Practical approach. First, programs to evaluate quality showed problems of equipment for this testing system and low qualification of personnel. So external evaluation of made it possible to improve testing systems, training of personnel, introduction of standard operational procedures. And from 2015 to 2018, we covered all district labs. As a result, the external results are reported to head doctors at the local level and then transferred to the Ministry of Health. There have been developed standards for serum panels internal control of lab operations and detection, evaluation of sensitivity of testing system. So my presentation is over. Thank you very much for your attention. Well, thank you very much. Indeed, you have touched a very important topic. As for external quality control, I understood that your institution acts as an expert body, but in order to ensure proper functions, you need some regulations. How do you work with your representatives of surveillance bodies in order to improve the situation and improve the operations of work? How do you eliminate some flaws in lab operations? Well, in order to improve lab operations, we transfer our reports to the Ministry of Health of Uzbekistan, and they issue decrees to train lab specialists and introduce internal lab control. I see. We also carry out the training of personnel that are in charge of external quality control. So you cooperate with the Ministry of Health. Well, thank you very much. Dear colleagues, are there any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you for this very interesting report. Dear Mr. Zhiraev, your presentation was very detailed and informative. I would like to specify it regarding sequencing of hepatitis C. Do you do it, and what genotype is prevailing in your area? Well, our lab work with sequencing of genotype of hepatitis C. The first type of genotype B of genotype C is prevailing here. 85 to 90% I counted of cases I counted to H1B genotype. Well, thank you very much. Other questions? No more? Well, thank you very much for your great presentation, for your time. Thank you for joining our conference. It was very important to follow your work, and your experience is indeed very interesting to all of us in order to improve our work as well. Thank you very much. Thank you. So, dear colleagues, our program is over. So I would like to say thank you to all of you for a very interesting discussion, for your attention. And I would like to say thank you to our speakers for their fantastic reports. I believe it's a very relevant topic that is going to be covered in on next sessions. And I believe we certainly will improve our performance in future and will ensure biological safety and epidemiological well-being. Thank you very much. All the best to you. And I hope we'll be working together in future as well. Thank you.